Welcome to Plymouth Profiles. Plymouth Profiles is an opportunity to meet with people from the greater Plymouth community. As many of you know, I grew up in the town of Kingston before moving to Plymouth as an adult, and I'm delighted to have as my guest another former resident from the town of Kingston who grew up there, and we welcome our newly elected state senator, Vinny deMacedo. Vinny, welcome.
Steve, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be on your show.
Vinny, for people that don't know your background, you are from Kingston, is that right?
That's right. We grew up 2 streets apart, well, actually 1 street apart, actually. And I grew up on Riverside Drive,
yeah.
And you were, was it Center Hill?
I was in the Nook.
I'm sorry. I thought you were.
No, Rocky Nook.
So you were in the Rocky Nook here. Okay,
right.
I apologize.
Right.
So,
well, you were young.
You were a couple years older than I was.
You were young. So. I think when you were born, I was probably in junior high or high school. Okay. So
now, did you have relatives that lived in that area at all, or
no? No. But as you know, my younger brother was hanging out with your siblings.
A good friend of my sister Maria.
That's right.
So. But thank you for having me on the show, and it's fun for me because now for 16 years I represented the town of Plymouth, but I grew up in Kingston, went to Silver Lake, so that's where I know so many people.
What year? What year did you graduate?
I graduated in 1983.
Oh, just a baby.
Yeah. And then, but now going out, I now have the opportunity to represent Kingston as well. So it was fun for me coming home, and having the opportunity knocking on doors, back in the area where I spent, my entire life growing up.
Terrific. So you went to Silver Lake. Then what happened?
After Silver Lake, I went to college in New York and I got a 4-year degree from the King's College, Briarcliff Manor, New York, and I was a business major, and that's how I got into That's how I got into politics. Not that I didn't go to school for politics, but being a business owner is what kind of drew me into the world of politics, because that government affects every aspect of your life, and as a business owner, I found that I needed to be involved to hopefully have a say. Now, when you graduated from college, your diploma said Viriato. How do you say it? Viriato? Viriato. Very well said.
Viriato. Yes. Why?
Well, that's my real name.
Okay.
But
that isn't on the election ballot. Every time when I consider whether I'm going to vote for you, it says Vinny.
It does, and as growing up, and it's a funny story. Vinny's a nickname. My uncle was Viriato. My grandfather was Viriato. But when
where?
I was born in the Cape Verde Islands.
Okay.
So
where's that?
The Cape Verde Islands. It's off the west coast of Africa.
Okay.
So what happened was he came to America, and his first job, Viriato was a mouthful. They gave him the nickname Vinny, and so that was in 1959. We came in 1966, and so so what they did is when I came here, it was just they gave me that nickname, and of course it stuck. And when everyone knows you as Vinny, and in politics, that's it's that relationship and that connection. So I actually had it legally changed on the ballot, so it says Vinny deMacedo.
And that actually happened a lot years ago. In my own family, all of my uncles and cousins have different last names, all have the same parents, but it was a case where my grandparents couldn't read and write, so it was whatever the nurse heard at the hospital is what ended up being on the birth certificate. But in your case, that's your real name.
That is my real name. That's my real name. And it's funny, a lot of people ask about the DE, and of course DE is just of, so
right,
Viriato of the Macedo family.
Yeah.
But of course when my parents came, the same thing. It was deMacedo, and so we incorporated it into our entire name. I have relatives who did it differently and are Macedo.
Sure. Right. And they're relatives, but it's different.
Same thing.
That's right. So okay, graduated from college. Then what happened?
Well, then as a small business owner, my brother Ollie, who I know you know well, was in the automobile business, and he asked me when I graduated from college if I'd come and work with him, and I did for some time, and he had the gas station as well, and so from that point I decided that when the economy really got tough and I was getting married, I decided that what, Ollie, he had the gas station, but he also had his car business and stuff like that. I said, I'll run this for you for a period of time until I can get settled and whatnot. because I was getting married and needed something stable, and the economy had really crashed, and we were in the car business, so it wasn't so good.
That's not the only time it crashed.
Yeah, I know, exactly. But you remember, I'm sure you remember
Yes, I do.
Black Monday there in 1987. And so what happened is I started doing that. The funny thing was, it was the last thing I ever wanted to do, but the gas station, I started doing it, and then you build a relationship and you get to know people. And I remember the day of my election, you were on the radio, and I was down by about 450 votes. And you were one of the few that said I had a shot, because you knew that I had been down in Cedarville and knew a lot of people in the gas station. So, well, let's wait and see what happens with Cedarville, because that was the last district to come in. And sure enough, we got 70% of the vote. And so it's funny, because the very thing that probably I wouldn't have thought I wanted to do was, run a gas station and eventually buy it, but doing the gas station ended up being the very reason I had the opportunity to get elected. It's kind of a funny story.
Well, I think it's that and the combination that I would say that it's important for you, for me, and for other people who are elected officials to not forget from where we come.
Exactly. And you know what? I appreciate that. As you know, I mean, we're local guys, and I think that our strength in the community is the fact that people know that we're one of them. We didn't, we haven't lost where we came from, and in anything like in politics, you see that happen. I see some of my colleagues, they get struck with the self-importance of themselves, and what I've learned in politics is when you're in, you're in, and when you're out, you're out, and you got to keep that in mind.
And easy come, easy go, as happens with some people.
As Peter Foreman always shared that be grounded, be mindful of where you're at. And so I'm thrilled. I still do the gas station every morning. I go from 6 to 7 every morning, do a little paperwork, pump a little gas, but I really feel like it keeps me grounded, and that's. Because under it all, that's who we represent. We're in this. I know you're in this for the same reason I am. You try to help people, and I tell you, it's every day. There's you run into somebody that needed some help, and that's exciting. I just had someone who called me the other day. I mean, actually, I walked into Water Street Cafe, and I'm sitting there because I had a meeting, and the woman walked in. And she said she says, "Oh my gosh, I haven't seen you since the election. I just wanted to thank you. You probably don't remember me, but she showed up on my door at 4 o'clock in the afternoon at my house, crying because she had a situation with a son who had been in the military, had a PTSD issue, and she was looking for assistance, and she just needed some help. And of course, where it's a federal issue, I reached out at that time to Scott Brown, and his office was very helpful. But she was so grateful, because it really, for her, it was assistance that she needed, and she didn't know where to go. So she showed up on my door. That, to me, I can't tell you how good that made me feel. And I reached out to Scott to say, hey, listen, I just want to give you a little story about the difference that you made in somebody's life. That's why we do this, and I enjoy that.
And it is true. Sometimes these things happen. It's nice to hear it, because you certainly hear the criticism when it doesn't go right, and you're doing so much, it's hard to track. Every once in a while when I receive an anecdote like that, and it's like, oh, well, I did it. I'm happy I did it, and thank you.
But that's the beauty of it, is not tracking it,
right? Because
you don't track it, and then that's where the reward is. If you're keeping track, and we do it because we want to help people. It's you do it as in your profession. You're helping people all the time. I mean, it's I'm sure you hear the lawyer jokes all the time until they need a lawyer, and then they're like, wow, this is and they're thrilled that they have someone that can guide them, and it's very, very similar. You as a lawyer, me as a legislator, that's what we're doing. We're trying to guide people through a maze in many cases.
So, speaking of being a legislator, when did you first become a legislator in Plymouth?
1998. I was elected in November of 1998. I started in January of 99.
How does that compare to the tenure of other prior legislators?
Well, as you know, the Senate President, Terry Murray, was there for 20-something years. Peter Foreman was a state representative for 14 years out of here. So we have some level of consistency, but you also have some shorter term legislators. The average legislator is, I don't think, any more than 10 years. And if you look up at the State House, where people talk about term limits, I will tell you, well over 50% have come in the last 6 years. It is a huge turnover.
So you're actually a senior member.
Well, I would have been a
legislator.
senior member in the House, but
Yes.
now in the Senate, I'm starting over. However, that being said, 22 of the 40 members in the Senate were former House members.
Okay.
So there is, there is a lot of relationships that I built, and even of the 18 other ones, those are people that I've worked with, just because there is a lot of cross-branch operation.
So in your years as a state representative, what were some of the highlights?
Kind of going back, and I really kind of made this, what to me was constituent services. I really tried to highlight that and help people. And I think that I've been able to accomplish that. I think people can look back and say that those 16 years that I was accessible, that I was approachable, and that when people needed help, when I could do it, I did. And was proud to be part of a great delegation. We, initially it was Tom O'Brien, Senator Murray, and then Tom Coulter came in, and we worked very closely together. We had a tight-knit group. And the neat thing is because we were, despite the fact we were from different political parties, people saw us as working together. And I think you see that now in the town of Plymouth. We have, you're a Democrat, I'm a Republican. We work together. We have the same desire to move Plymouth forward and want the best for the community. Sometimes we may disagree a little bit, but the reality is we're on the same page. And right now, to me, I look at that and it is the most cohesive I believe it's ever been, that we consistently are working together. There's, we all understand that we're trying to do the best.
And I don't usually try to mix the politics, but since you brought it up, and it's my show, and I can say this, I did in fact support and work for you in this most recent campaign, even though I'm a Democrat, because I felt that your candidacy was best for the town of Plymouth and best for the constituents. So
I appreciate that.
I think it's important to while we have our party affiliations, to work across the aisle and across party lines to do what's best for the town, and I appreciate that you have often done that.
Well, I've come to understand it in a greater sense over the 16 years, and as you can imagine, I deal in the legislature where 85% are Democrats, and I've found out the importance of the relationship, and frankly, understanding the other side and trying to find that balance, and I think it's really helped me a lot. And I think that, matter of fact, I'm involved with a gentleman by the name of Jay Kaufman, representative. Far left, left, and I'm a Republican, but we're working together on what they call a civility project. As you know, what's going on in Washington, there's this partisan divide is huge, and so we're actually working at a national level with NCSL to bring the civility project to Massachusetts, the Massachusetts legislature, to try to give people an understanding and tips to better deal in the political realm without taking it personally, without the fact that you and I may disagree, without making it personal. And how is it that you do that? There are very simple ways. I've learned it over 16 years of being in the legislature, but there are many people come in and they think that that they've jumped in and they got to put their political suit on, a Republican or Democrat. And their job is to represent the people, in my case, the people of the 1st Plymouth District, not the people not the Republicans of the 1st Plymouth District. Everybody. And that's the challenge. How do you do that?
So even though you've referenced the fact that there are 80-some-odd% Democrats with whom you work in the legislature, I remember an anecdote that I heard from Plymouth County Register of Deeds, John Buckley, who told me that at the time when there was a move to get the building built, and this may have also come from Plymouth County Treasurer Tom O'Brien, it may have been from him, saying that at the time there was a Republican governor sitting, and that it was you as the local Republican state representative who put in a good word to the then Republican governor for the building of that registry. Do you remember that?
I do. That was an issue that they were concerned about, relying just on the registry deed money. You're building a new building. As you knew, that building needed to be updated. And to me, that's not a Republican-Democrat issue. That is this is my community. This is what we believe is important. And I think we had so many important documents to protect, and we weren't doing it well. And so a new facility would have been great. And I obviously worked with Tom and with John, and at that point the bill, I think, had been vetoed a few times, and I made a personal plea to the then governor to say,
who was that at that time?
That would have been Jane Swift.
Okay.
And I asked her not to veto the bill one more time. She didn't sign it, but she didn't veto it. So it was able to, it ended up becoming law through the process. So, and that's the beauty of, today, one day it's Jane Swift, the next day it's Deval Patrick. It doesn't matter. So we have to find ways to work with people despite the party.
But let me ask you a question. We're taping this in January 2015. You've recently taken your seat now in the Senate, and we have a new governor who happens to be Republican. Do you have a relationship with that governor?
Of course. I mean, Charlie, I am the most excited I've been about a governor in a long time, because she has this philosophy that you and I are talking about right now, and he's probably one of the smartest politicos policy wonks, let's just say. He understands government. He's very efficient and effective. He's very open. It's not like I'm right, you're wrong. It's, hey, how do we find common ground here? How do we do this? And I heard that story time and time again from former Harvard Pilgrim Health people. As you know, he took over Harvard Pilgrim Health, and everybody said that, oh my gosh, he's a corporate raider. He's going to come in here. He's going to clean our clocks. And time after time, I had people tell me they were just so elated at how open he was. He turned the company around, and as everyone knows, Harvard Pilgrim Health is a success story, and I think it was because of his leadership style. And I feel very confident that we're going to see that play out here in the Commonwealth.
So he's our governor, and you're now our senator. What's different about being a senator versus a state rep? And let's start by saying, who did you represent when you were state rep?
Well, I represented the town of Plymouth, but not all of Plymouth. As you know, every representative represents 40,000 people. The town of Plymouth is 60,000, between 55 and 60,000 people. So I didn't even represent all of Plymouth. Now, all of a sudden, I go from
all of Plymouth,
all of Kingston, all of Pembroke, and then you go over the bridge and all of Bourne, all of Sandwich and Falmouth, which is interesting because Bourne, Sandwich, and Falmouth are different. They have a lot of different issues than we do here. So I think north of the bridge,
that canal really is a dividing point.
Yeah, and it's funny that and the Senate president used to tell me this all the time. It is a different world over there. But you know what? I went over there. I worked hard, and I was able to make some inroads in that area and build some relationships. I think I started off here because of being from Kingston, and going to Silver Lake, Pembroke. With that relationship with Pembroke, and obviously representing Plymouth for 16 years, it was fine. But now it's a much bigger area, and I have to try to divide my time up and be able to understand their issues as much as I understand our community's issues.
And I know that when you were doing that, you not only worked with the residents from that area, but also with the business community from that area. And we had talked about some of the business groups like the Chamber of Commerce and the Canal Chamber of Commerce, and working with some of the people there to understand their concerns.
Well, and that's that's the one thing that I find that we do have in common, because that in many ways our bread and butter is the tourism industry. Well, that's the same over the bridge as well. Right. So we have that unique tie. So going to the business communities and being busy, you've been involved in the chamber forever. You're involved in that chamber as well as this chamber. So you understand that relationship, and so that was probably the easiest part, building those ties, because as a business owner and as someone who's been a huge advocate for tourism and economic development, we get that, they got that, and I think they understood that I would continue to fight for them as much as I did here in Plymouth.
So you said there were 40 senators? 40 senators. How many state reps?
There are 160 state reps.
So far fewer senators.
Less
one
senators.
Of 40.
Yes, 1 of 40.
So what does it feel like to be sitting in the Senate as compared to the state rep? I mean, a lot of it probably is the same. What's different?
It's more individualized. In the legislature, in the House, there's groups of people and stuff like that. You operate as a group, and your office space is in a group. When you're a senator, you're separated. Every senator has his own, staff and office, and they represent a region. So there's not as much. There's great collegiality, but there's not as much social interaction. Now, me, I'm a social person, so I loved the House, but I think I'll have an opportunity to be more effective for my community in the Senate because you have more, hopefully more influence. And I'm hoping with the administration that I can make, in my relationship with the new governor, I can make the case for this community and the challenges that the Plymouth Barnstable District has, that we're consistently, hopefully, a priority to him and his administration.
Now, I know at the federal level, while there are many issues that are reviewed jointly by both the House and the Senate, there are also some matters that are only within the scope of the Senate. And I guess I would ask at the state level, are there ever any times when the Senate acts independently from the representatives?
Well, we have in the Commonwealth a governor's council. So when you're doing judges, so in the Senate you have senators are the ones who decide who your judges are going to be at the federal level. Here we have a governor's council that does that. So that is something that's different. But as far as legislation goes, it has to pass the House and it has to pass the Senate before it ever gets to the governor, and then it comes back. So to that extent, no. Many of our committees are joint committees. There are things that we will do separately. For example, right now, Senator Stan Rosenberg, the new Senate president, decided that his first action was going to be to send those of us in the Senate, the 40 of us, around the state to go and try to find out what are the most important issues to you. And so starting on February 9th, we're going to have one here in this region. It's this Dan Wolf, myself, and Senator Kennedy in that region. And we're going to start a listening tour. And so only the House is doing it, and we're going to go around the state, and we're going to try to get a sense of what do the people of the Commonwealth feel is the most important issues. What should we be tackling first over this next two-year legislative session?
And before that listening tour starts, at least as it relates to your region and your constituency, do you have any sense as to what might be important to people?
I will tell you, I've heard this time and time and time again, and it's the opiate addiction epidemic. Literally, every time I talk about it, it touches everybody. It gives me goosebumps because when I see these beautiful young kids destroying their lives, not thinking they're thinking they're having fun, and all of a sudden they get hooked. Once they get hooked, it's over. And so I don't know how we can do this better, but we have to. We have to get, to me, the big issue right now is education, education, education. We've done a lot to address access, cutting back, doctors, the way they're prescribing opiates. We've addressed the Section 35s, putting people in, getting treatment. But we have to do a better job of stopping kids from trying it in the first place. Because once they get hooked, I don't care how good you are. And you've seen it. It doesn't matter what they do, what they try. Once their brain is rewired, it is rewired, and it owns them, and it's going to destroy them. And so it's stopping them from ever playing with it.
And you're so right, because historically, I would hear about drug issues more in my professional life as a lawyer, which I still do. However, more recently, I've been hearing about it when I'm in social situations unrelated to my work, where somebody says, I just went to a funeral because a relative or a friend died due to an overdose. And it's amazing to me how many times I've heard that in the past year.
And certainly the deaths, it's just at every aspect of life. And what happens is they become desperate and they'll do anything. So they rob, steal, and someone shared a little anecdote with me. Is this young girl walks up to a bank, hands her a note. Please give me your money. Not give me all your money. It's please. It's they've been brought up with all the manners, but they have to have the money to get the drug, and that's what you're seeing happening now. And it's avoidable. It is so avoidable if we can get to the young people to let them know that this is a dead end, that this is, you're going to destroy your life. You're going to not only destroy your life, your family, and and ultimately can end up being, you can end up dying, which is a scary thought.
Well, the good news is, at least in our area, the Plymouth District Court has drug court, and Judge Rosemary Minahan has done a great job, being a forward thinker and leader in that. And we have,
she's the best. She is phenomenal.
She is terrific. Yeah. And then we have programs such as Reflections and other places where people can go for residential placement. But I would agree with you, there's still so much that has to be done really before they get to court.
Right.
To try to avoid court intervention and nip it in the bud.
Yeah. She was the one who actually, and I had a couple of anecdotal situations that happened to me personally, as far as customers, constituents sharing what was happening.
Sure.
And of course, with her talking about it, I called her. I said, "Tell me what's going on." And she shared, and we did a summit.
She knows.
And she knew, and we brought together school, police, fire. We brought everyone together, and we started talking about it a while, probably 5 or 6 years ago in Plymouth, and everybody got it, and we started working. And I'll tell you, we are a part of the Plymouth Youth Development Corporation, and we've got such a, Peter Holden, Gary Maestas, Chief Botieri, Chief Bradley, the District Attorney's Office, and we are working to try to address this issue. And I'll tell you, that's a meeting that, we're all part of meetings. Every one of these people always show up to that meeting because we know how important this issue is, and we're trying to find new and innovative ways to get to these young people so that they don't make that mistake.
And of course, what's difficult is that's an issue for Plymouth, it's an issue for your towns that you represent, but it's really obviously a statewide issue, a national issue. But how do you, when you have this group locally in Plymouth, interface with a more regional effort?
I'll just give you. We were talking about this, and I get an idea for legislation coming up that I'm going to file this year, and it was through the Plymouth Youth Development Corporation, because we were saying, how do we get to the kids before they ever start?
Right.
And so, as you know, and it's just, there are very few opportunities that you have to get to a student and their parents at the same time. And so the idea that was brought up is, well, everyone has to get, when you get a driver's license, what happens? You have to go to class, and now it's much more extensive, the junior operator license, and their parents are required now to actually go to a class. So I'm going to ask to incorporate in that educational aspect of it, a 15-minute video, which was designed by a gentleman who was a doctor whose neighbor got hooked on heroin and died. And he was so moved that he put together the science of addiction. And I will tell you, the science of addiction is what was like, it was like a light bulb that went out for me to understand that it's not that you're weak. Once you've done this, once that heroin, whatever that drug is, has rewired your brain, you have to have it. And when you understand the science of addiction, hopefully you'll understand why you shouldn't play with this, because you can easily rewire your brain. And no matter how good you are, no matter how hard you want to try, you can't stop yourself from wanting that drug.
And it's so related to licensing, because I can think of some of my clients in the past year. One of them was pulled over for driving with an open can of alcohol. Another one failed a random drug screen, but the underlying charges were motor vehicle related. So it's definitely an appropriate way in which to do that. So Vinny, it's wonderful having you. You're going to have to come back, but
I would like
we're
to,
already beginning to run out of time.
We haven't even started to talk about all the things.
So quick, a couple of things you want to mention before we go.
Well, just, I really wanted to thank, and we're here in Plymouth, and I do want to thank the people of the town of Plymouth. 73% of the vote. I literally was just incredibly moved by the broad support that I had. I promised them that over the next 2 years, I am going to work very hard, diligently on the behalf, try to find consensus, common ground up on Beacon Hill for the betterment of this community, not just Plymouth, but the entire Plymouth Barnstable district. But I just wanted to take a little shout out, because I was so literally moved by that level of support. And
Vinny, since you mentioned common ground, we'll talk one more time, give you an opportunity, but across the aisle. My next guest is a Democrat.
Absolutely.
Matt McDonough, newly elected to the Register of Probate. Any comments?
Matt and I, it's funny as life goes. We've worked on stuff together outside of this, and it's because of constituent issues. Yeah. Someone comes to me and he's working on a case and trying to get some insight. So I'll tell you, Plymouth County, it's just a unique area. We work together, and Matt and I have worked together on some issues, and I think we both feel that we've both been very helpful to each other. Thank you, Senator Vinny deMacedo. This completes this segment of our program. We want to thank again Senator Vinny deMacedo. Also, a shout out to Ken Bukes in the control room. This wouldn't happen without him. And please stay tuned as we welcome Matt McDonough
newly elected Register of Probate for Plymouth County. Thank you. Hello, welcome back to this edition of Plymouth Profiles, which is an opportunity to meet with people from the greater Plymouth community. We just finished with our new state senator, Vinny deMacedo. Thanks to Vinny for joining us. And now we're delighted to have as our guest in the second half our newly elected Plymouth County Register of Probate, Matt McDonough. Matt, welcome.
Steve, pleasure to be here.
Happy to have you here. Matt, last time you were here with us, you were a candidate for Register of Probate, but it was actually a different forum. I think it was Talk of the Town. This is Plymouth Profiles. So for people that didn't catch you the first time around, give us a little bit of your background.
Sure. Thank you for having me on. I started my career in public service after I graduated from law school. I went directly to the district attorney's office, and I worked in the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office for 10 years, prosecuted all sorts of crime, and I know you had a good discussion with State Senator Vinny deMacedo about the opiate addiction issues. And that's something that I, in particular, spent a lot of my focus as a prosecutor on, prosecuting high-level traffickers of opiates and other drugs, trying to help folks through the drug court system in Quincy District Court when I worked there. I also specialized in the motor vehicle homicide prosecutions, where you unfortunately have to deal with a lot of folks who are engaging in drunk driving and the aftermath of those decisions. From district court, I went on to Superior Court, where I prosecuted many different types of major felonies. And as an aside, at the same time that I was engaging in my career in the DA's office, my wife Suzanne was working as a prosecutor in the Plymouth County DA's office, and she's still there today. So during my time in the DA's office, I was very engaged in the communities that I was trying to protect, and I wanted to do more for my own home community in Marshfield. So I decided to run for the school committee back in 2007. I served for one term on the school committee, and we were able to do some really great things for the town of Marshfield, working with the folks on the school committee, the administration, and the whole community. We built a brand new high school. We started full-day kindergarten. I was inspired by seeing everybody come together around that full-day kindergarten issue and building our new high school and seeing people getting so civically involved. I decided I would take a shot at an open seat for the Board of Selectmen. So I'm now in my second term on the Board of Selectmen, and I'm still on the Board of Selectmen even though I'm the new Register of Probate. So I'm, at the same time that I'm dealing with complex legal issues, trying to help folks when they're going through difficult times in the courts, I'm also dealing with the very retail politics issues in Marshfield when folks have issues with the roadways, school system, and we're still working on some major issues that we've talked about before, such as the FEMA flood map issue, where we're engaged right now in an appeal process that has frozen the newly expanded flood maps for all of Plymouth County. So hopefully we'll have some good news for the folks in Plymouth County in the coming months before the end of the fiscal year about what's going to happen with those FEMA flood maps. So those are the things that keep me busy professionally and civically. Suzanne and I also have a wonderful family. My daughter Kara is now almost 6 years old. She's very precise. She likes to say she's 5 3/4. And Coleman is now 4, and he's becoming a great young boy who's interested in sports, and he's looking forward to the Patriots game this weekend. And little Katie is now 1 year old, and she's basically sprinting around the house. And that all happened, last time I saw you, she was a crawler. So our house is a very busy place right now.
It keeps you busy.
It does, yeah.
So, Matt, I don't know if I recall that you started your elective office career in the school committee, which is how I started.
Yes.
And it's a great, I think, way to start, particularly when you have children and a young family to get involved. But you mentioned about being in Marshfield. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in the towns of Scituate and Kingston. I went through the school system in Kingston, and you and I share that common background of being proud Silver Lake graduates. Right. And from Silver Lake, I ended up going on to College of the Holy Cross out in Worcester, which was a great opportunity, not only for the education, but being involved with the Jesuits and the spirit of volunteerism that they bring to the education that you get there. And I carried that with me as I went to Boston College Law School, where you were also a graduate as well, Steve. And I got a great education there, but the best part about my education was that I met my wife Suzanne the first year of law school.
It's good. Those things happen.
It is good.
You part of the same study group?
I would say that she was the stronger of the two of us in the study group. Yeah. She would say that as well.
Well, good for you. So what drew you to the Register of Probate position?
Well, this position was occupied by Bob McCarthy for the last 14 years, and Bob is an amazing public servant, former selectman, state representative, a senator. He was a candidate for Congress, a West Point graduate. So first and foremost, I want to say thank you to Bob for his years of service. And Bob had announced that he wasn't going to run for re-election, that it was time for him to retire and enjoy some time with his family. So when I heard that, I became very interested. It's a job that involves, in my opinion, management experience, having an understanding of how union contracts work. All of our employees are within a union, being able to manage those types of relationships. That's a strong background that I have from working in the town of Marshfield and the Board of Selectmen. From the attorney background, I've been in private practice, and I've also been a prosecutor for over a decade. And that background, I think, lends itself to helping people as they're dealing with not only the attorneys that deal with complex issues, but the pro se litigants. Our first justice estimated that over 80% of the people that come before him are representing themselves. So having somebody who's dealt with folks who are victims of crimes and trying to deal with the trial court system for the very first time, I think is a very strong thing that I have in my background that I can bring to the job. Above all else, I want to help people. We became lawyers because we like helping people. I know you well enough to say that. And I always look for any opportunity in my career to take another step towards using my background, my education, to helping make somebody else's life a little bit better. And this job just really spoke to me and said, this is what you want to do, Matt.
So in our earlier segment, I talked a little bit about the district court with Judge Rosemary Minigan.
Yes.
People hear the word probate court, but if they've not been there, what's the probate court?
Well, the probate court is where you're going to bring any of your issues having to do with family, probating an estate when you've lost a loved one, divorces, guardianships, name changes, and the shining light of the court system really is the adoption process. A lot of the times when people come into the court system, they're dealing with some of the worst family circumstances you can imagine. Having somebody pass away, trying to deal with not only the emotional issues of a loss, but dealing with the financial issues, trying to figure out how does this person's desire of how they want their estate to be passed out, how does that happen within the law? And these are very emotional, trying times when folks have these questions. So I think it's very important that we provide services to them at the front counter so that they can figure out where they need to be, especially if they don't have a lawyer. And one of the things that Bob McCarthy did that he was great with over the last 14 years was our Attorney of the Day program. And you yourself have supported the Attorney of the Day program for many years, and your family. And I thank you for that. Attorneys, and some folks don't believe me when I say this, they're giving their time free.
Yeah, we're not paid for it.
You're not paid at all.
Right.
And you're doing it because you want to help people.
Right.
So 5 days a week in Plymouth County, unlike some of the other counties who have a different system, 5 days a week in Brockton and Plymouth, you can come in and there's a qualified attorney who's scheduled to meet with folks starting at 9 a.m. And they go through the list. It's first come, first serve. And they go basically till 1 in the afternoon every day, answering questions about probate, family law, helping folks deal with very difficult, sensitive issues. The reason we do that is because even though I'm a lawyer and we do have another lawyer in the office, we're not allowed to give legal advice at the front counter. We can only explain procedure, help folks with the forms, but when they come to that point where they're asking legal questions that are particular to their circumstances, we need that extra service that you and the other attorneys of the day provide us.
And really, that's pro bono work.
It is.
By the attorneys who volunteer, and it's really a way to give back to the community.
I'll tell you, the District Bar in Plymouth County, the Plymouth County Bar Association, and the Pilgrim Bar Advocates have been outstanding participants in this program, and I can't thank them enough for the service that they provide for all the families in Plymouth County.
Well, and I think it's really, truly a partnership with the lawyers and the court and the staff to try to figure out how can we better deliver services to the public, because really we can't do it without the judges and your staff, and you really can't do it without us. So it really it's kind of a living process whereby we all need to kind of check in and try to work together.
It's extremely dynamic, and that's what's exciting about a job like this. When I try to explain it to some of my friends, they say, well, you know, some of that stuff sounds complex and maybe a little boring. And I start to explain it to them. I said, well, hey, we had a new domestic violence law that came into effect recently, and that impacts our court. And you start to talk about the different ways, pragmatically, the practical effects when you talk about maybe a particular hypothesis, and somebody really, they brighten up and they're like, wow, that makes sense. sense. I can see how that affects my life. And that's the fun part of this job, is that it's constantly evolving. The law is never stagnant. It's always growing and changing, whether it's by case law or new or changed amended statutes. And I've really enjoyed, I've only been on the job for a week, but I have loved the dynamic of being able to work with the judges, being able to work with the attorneys, being able to work with the public and the pro se litigants who have questions. And in the last week, I have loved being able to work with my staff. The people in my office, we've been doing interviews this past week where I just get to sit down with them one-on-one and talk for about a half hour. We have folks who have worked within the probate court system hundreds of years worth of experience helping people dealing with these circumstances, and they all have different ideas and they all want to engage in how we can make the process better. So that's the type of thing that I'm so happy to see coming in as the new register, is that people have a lot of energy and they want to bring more change.
So yesterday I was a customer of yours in Plymouth.
Wonderful.
Friday I'll be a customer in Brockton.
Good.
So explain to our audience, why is that?
Well, our county seat is in Plymouth, and if you think historically of Plymouth County, it makes sense. But over time, of course, as the city of Brockton grew, you have many more people in the northern part of the county that weren't there in the 1700s, and there grew a need for a court system to be in Brockton as well. So we have two courts, the District Court on Main Street in Brockton, where we're housed on the second floor, and down at Obery Street, 52 Obery Street, and the new courthouse that used to be part of the old farm from the Plymouth County Sheriff's Department. So if folks need services from the probate and family court, those are the two options that you have across Plymouth County.
And yesterday I was before Judge Stanton in Plymouth. Friday I'll be before Judge Ward. Explain to the people watching, how does that come about? How do we know where to go and what to do?
Well, when you deal with in the different trial courts, they handle assignment of cases differently. In the district court and superior court, on the criminal and civil end, you don't always know that you're going to have the same judge. Sometimes things change. Frequently in the criminal cases, it's very few and far in between where a judge takes ownership of a case. Cases are assigned on the probate cases in the family court. So you'll know who you're going to be dealing with, and you'll be able to check the schedule online. And that's one thing that I really like that Bob McCarthy did that was innovative in the time. 2001, when he first came in, he was one of the first registers to start his own website, and he would post the calendar so folks could see where the different judges are going to be sitting, whether it's Brockton or Plymouth. They'll know which judge has their case. The attorneys do the same thing. They check the calendar all the time. So it's a commitment that I'm going to continue in making sure that we have as smooth as transition as possible between Bob's website and whatever new website we come up with, to make sure that public information is there for folks so that they can use the court in the most easy fashion possible.
So just before we taped this show, I was meeting with clients who have a matter in probate court, a guardianship, and we were deciding whether or not tomorrow we're going to go in on an emergency basis before what we call an e-judge, or whether we're going to go in on a regular motion and give notice of 7 to 10 days. Now, one of the first things I did when I left the meeting was call my office and said, check and see who the judge is and what day the judge will hear motions, because as you said, we take full advantage of the website telling us where the judges are on any given day. But explain to people what's involved in terms of emergencies or an e-judge. How is the court open to people?
If folks have an emergency, especially the emergencies that I see most frequently have to do with restraining orders, and that has changed greatly in recent years. We have much more access to the probate court system for restraining orders now. Traditionally, it was an issue that was mostly brought up in the trial court and the district courts. So if folks do have an emergency, they can come into the courts. I always recommend checking the calendars ahead of time, calling the office ahead of time. But when they come in for an emergency, we're there for them, whatever that may be. Sometimes it's an emergency that coincides with a criminal complaint. Sometimes it's not, and we try to be as flexible as we can. One of the things that the court is going to be doing in the future with training for our staff is to help folks at the front counter. We have great staff with many, many years of experience.
You certainly do, yes.
But you can always use more training about how to deal with people when they're in sensitive situations. So there's going to be trainings that deal with biases and helping our folks at the front counter understand and recognize when people are coming in with an emergency situation, how to handle that situation, how to handle folks who may have issues of mental illness or other issues that need some special attention and a higher level of patience and understanding when we're dealing with them. So those are some of the issues that we deal with on a frequent basis.
And you have people right out there in the front line at that desk, and they
Right.
are greeted with the public.
Right.
And people have a lot of stress when they come to a courthouse. It's something that I think often for those of us working there on a daily basis, we have to be reminded of that because we don't always remember.
Absolutely. And I also want to recognize our pro se litigants. Almost everybody has some interaction with the probate court during their lifetime, but the attorneys who represent folks on a regular basis are there quite frequently. So I also want to focus on the needs of the attorneys. Some of the issues that have been brought to my attention, we've talked about, are just the simple getting of forms in the morning. So we're trying to figure out different ways that we can get forms into the hands of the attorneys without them having to stand in line and wait through all of the other pro se litigants and the other counsel who may have other business. So if there's any way that we can find to create efficiency and hospitality at the front desk, that's going to be a goal that I have.
So earlier I talked about Judge Stanton and Judge Ward, or at least referenced them.
Sure.
So judges are probably some of the most visible people who are involved in the probate court.
Right.
Who else do you have in Plymouth County?
For the judges?
Yes.
Right now we're at 5 judges, and I was recently informed that we're going to be losing Judge Ward. As happens in many circumstances, judges do get ill, they do retire, so the numbers have been affected to a point where the trial court administrative staff has decided that we're going to take one of the judges from Plymouth County and send them to another county. So now we're left with 4 judges. We have Judge Sabatis, who's our former First Justice, Justice Boyle, who is our current First Justice, Judge Stanton, and Judge Roberts. So those are the 4 judges that we're going to have. Hopefully, we can't say that we'll have them for forever, but hopefully we all benefit when we have some static in energy with the judges. They all work together in a certain way. They get to know each other. The staff gets to know the judges, not only the judicial case managers that work for each individual judge, but my staff who ends up processing the papers and docketing those papers after the judges have handled their matters in court. So having some stability with the judges for a period of time will certainly help my office, and I think it'll also help the public.
So, Matt, you were recently sworn in.
I was.
So
yeah.
what have you done since you've been sworn in?
Well, the swearing in process, I definitely would like to share that, pull the curtain back and let folks know what that's like. It's you walk into a room, and I wanted to get sworn in right away, so the Secretary of State was very gracious. I went up to the State House last week, and he's got hundreds of people that he's got to get sworn in. He's got all the representatives that Senator deMacedo spoke about, the senator and all of his 39 colleagues, and all the registers are coming in, and all these other elected officials. So you have a few minutes where the Secretary's going to come in. So I just brought my son Coleman, my daughter Kara, my daughter Katie, my wife, my mother-in-law came, my dad came, and the Secretary comes in, and my son, he's precocious, 4 years old, he's running circles around the room. So we're trying to get him to stand still just so we could do the simple swearing in, and the Secretary was such a patient gentleman. He's trying to shake Coleman's hand, and Coleman at 4 years old looks at him, he goes, "I want a fist pound." And he puts out his hand. So it's like, it seems like a very formal set up, scheduled type of affair, but it's really not.
Yeah.
It was really enjoyable because it got to be about my family, and having a quick little celebration for 15 minutes. I got sworn in, I became official, and I know it's something that my daughter Kara, my oldest, she will carry with her for so many years. She's asked me so many questions about it this past week.
And children have a way of doing that.
They do. Yeah.
And they do eventually grow up, because I know you've seen and met my son, who's now an adult.
Yes.
But he had his 4-year-old days as well.
Yeah.
And now he's working with us.
So that day ended, and I went to work the next day, and the excitement was there. I mean, people, they haven't had somebody new in 14 years, and they had a great guy with Bob McCarthy. They're all curious about what kind of a leader I'm going to be. So I let them all know. I said, I want to speak with every single one of you over the next week or 2 weeks. We'll have our interviews. I get to hear where you've been, why you came to work in this courthouse, why you chose this as a profession. And after that, I'll follow all of interview, and you'll teach me the ins and outs, the very peculiar, particular ins and outs of your job, how you prioritize your morning, how you handle your cases, what you do when you're at the front desk, so that I know everything about what my staff does on a daily basis. Then I will regroup with the supervisors for each division and our office manager, and then we can make some meaningful decisions about where we can find those efficiencies that I was talking about before. So that's the game plan right now. That's what we've been doing for the last week, and probably what we'll be doing for the next week or two before we start to come up with some ideas about improvements for our court.
That certainly sounds like a great place to start, and you may be hearing from people in the same position different things that could then be shared.
Yes.
You have several assistant registers who clerk for the judges.
Absolutely,
and I'm sure they talk, but maybe they don't talk all the time, and maybe you'll hear something from one that could help another, and vice versa.
And we got a great dialogue with the judges as well. Judge Boyle is the first justice. He has been very wonderful in giving me his ideas and his input. The folks in the public, they only get to see the judges in their black robes on the bench. I get to get the feedback from the judge afterwards, which is a great tool for me. And I can't say enough about the work that they do. Our justices in Plymouth County, they're there working hard every day in both Plymouth and Brockton to get through the caseload. I admire Judge Boyle for something he said to me last year. He said, "Matt, my job is to help people get through a difficult process." And that's the type of mantra that I want to carry, is that every day we're here to help people get through a difficult process.
Matt, you have a county seat.
Yes.
But you're part of a state court.
That's correct.
So as an attorney, I know that when I go to Bristol County or Essex or any other counties, that it's similar, but it's not exactly the same. How are you going to be interfacing beyond Plymouth County with other county probate courts and the overall state court or trial court?
Absolutely. So we have a registrars association. Good. All of the registrars, the 14 registrars, belong to a group, and the president of our association, which is a great bonus for me, is somebody that I'm friends with, somebody I've worked with in the past, and that's Pat McDermott from Norfolk County. Good. And he's a wonderful registrar, and he's doing a really good job organizing the registers so that we share concerns, we share information, we learn what we all need in terms of information technology, staff support, and support from the main office and the trial courts. The judges and the administrative staff in the trial courts have been great to me since I got elected. I've already been to Boston 3 or 4 times to meet with the Chief Justice of the Probate and Family Court. I've had the chance to meet with the Chief Justice of the SJC, Chief Justice Gantz, who is, he knows that he won't work with us on a daily basis, but he wanted us to know that he cares about what we do, because we're in the job of helping people. And that is just a continual theme that I have gotten from the trial courts, and they're constantly trying to do more with fewer resources, especially since the recession of 2008. So I was very impressed with the programs that they've had, and they've had to work with, they now have a system with Harry Spence, who's our court administrator, and a justice who works with Mr. Spence, and they're administering the whole court system, which is a new system in the last 2.5 years. And it's been innovative. They're looking for new ways to hold people accountable too, to make sure that if there are any behavioral issues with elected clerks or registrars such as myself, folks will have a streamlined process so that their rights are preserved and folks are held accountable. When I have spoken, there was an issue up in Suffolk County that became very public with a registrar there, and I think they've made great strides forward to make sure that those types of things are handled in an expedited process.
And where do the registrars meet?
That's a great question. I can't wait.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, all right.
Well, I haven't been to a Registrars Association meeting yet, but due to the fact that I worked in Norfolk County and I knew Pat McDermott well, I struck up a relationship with him over the last year where he's given me a lot of information about what the organization does and what their goals are. But I look forward to the first Registrars meeting. I've only had the opportunity to meet a handful of the registrars spread across the state. Obviously, geographically, we're spread quite far apart. But in particular, I was able to meet Registrar Gina DeRossi down in Bristol County, and she runs a wonderful organization down there. I met at great length with Bob McCarthy during the transition process, and I've had the chance to shadow Pat McDermott in Norfolk County during one of his work days while I was during Christmas time, so that I could see how his office runs and maybe bring some ideas back to Plymouth.
So you obviously ran for the office, had some ideas about what you would like to see happen going forward. Tell us now, after a short time being involved, what is it that would be some of your goals going forward?
I want to make sure our office is accessible as possible to the public. Access to justice is really a theme that you have to keep in mind with any decisions about how maybe to change the office, to improve the office, and anything that we do beyond the confines of our office itself. As the Register, I'm not just somebody who manages the employees, I'm also an elected official, and I made promises on the campaign trail that I plan on keeping, having to do with the major underlying issues that bring people to our front door. From my experience as an attorney, as a prosecutor, as a public official, the opiate addiction is a huge issue that is destroying families, and it's literally killing people, and it's something that we all need to address. And Senator deMacedo spoke about the work that he's done in Plymouth. I've done much work in Marshfield, in my area, working with our police departments and other regional groups. It's an issue that I will be very vocal about, and I will be working on different programs on, not only in my own town of Marshfield, but representing all of Plymouth County as the Register of Probate. Another issue that I'm very passionate about is the issues of domestic violence. As a prosecutor, I got to see on a daily basis, you know, none of these issues have walls between them, of course. Sometimes you have addiction issues that run into domestic violence, but you want to find as many different ways as possible to let folks know who are victims, that they can empower themselves, how to go through the process of getting restraining orders, which are, you know, available within our court, and making sure that their families are going to be safe, and then they can make sound decisions about family safety planning. So those are the issues that I'm very passionate about. They've been something I've worked on for many years as an attorney.
You mentioned that Plymouth County will be down a judge.
Yes.
Fairly soon. What is the level of business last year compared to maybe the year before?
I think that I was looking at the statistics for last year, and the trial court administrative staff was telling me we were about 12,000 filings last year. I'm not sure about the year before, but some of the staff in our interviews have said that they've seen the numbers going up a little bit, and you know, in their own anecdotal stories, they believe that may have to do with the recession that we went through, that people do fall on hard times and have difficulties within their families, and that they saw some increase in filings, especially in the emergency orders during that period of time from 2008 to present. But we're around 12,000 in the filings.
Do you interact with any other elected officials?
Constantly. I always try to, because again, just as there's no walls between these issues that I care passionately about, there are no walls that should exist between somebody because they're a state rep and they don't deal with county issues, a county official who doesn't deal with trial court issues. We all have to approach this together, whatever issues we're passionate about. I have the advantage of having served as a selectman in Marshfield. I was Marshfield's representative to the County Advisory Board for many years, and I still am. And I'm currently the vice chair of the County Advisory Board. So that's the legislative board for county government. I work hand in hand with the county commissioners, with our Register of Deeds, John Buckley, with our county treasurer, Tom O'Brien, and traveling the county and campaigning for a seat like this, you're dealing with all of the local selectmen, school committee members, DPW members, and all of the individual towns in the 26 towns in Plymouth County, and all our city councilors in Brockton. So it's a job where you are out on the road quite a lot to engage with people, but I think that's where you're going to get the best feedback and learn what's best for, not only for your office, but ideas you may be able to share with your local state rep or senator that they can pick up and take care of up at the State House.
Matt, we're just about done, so what would be the last thing you'd want people to remember as they watch this show, either about the Register of Probate or Probate Court?
Well, two quick things. One is I want to say thank you to all of the folks who trusted me to be the next Register of Probate, to follow in the shoes of a great man like Bob McCarthy, and I promise I will give this office every ounce of energy and experience that I have. The second is that we're going to try to make sure that during our transition process, our services aren't interrupted at all, whether it's through the website or through the front counter. If folks have any problems whatsoever, they can call our office and they can ask for me if they need to, and I'll try to address their concerns. But I want to make sure that they know that the services are there for them, that continuity will be ensured, and if they have any ideas, they can reach out as well through our website. You can just Google search Plymouth Probate and Family Court, and Bob's website, now my website, will pop right up.
Matt McDonough,
Steve,
thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so
Newly elected Register of Probate for Plymouth County.
Thank you, sir.
And this completes this edition of Plymouth Profiles. Please join us for future presentations. Thank you.